Greeks, a wonderful club that really brought family together. But that generation was brought together with an opportunity of being amongst each other, and the youth really wanted to be with their family. It was an opportunity for all of them. I should say to you that the shot down the bottom is my grandfather arriving here in the late 30s and the ship that he came on. So generations change, and I put that there because I think in many ways that generation was seeking family. They were seeking, there was a relevance about what they did. The relevance to them, and particularly to my mother, as I always say, well, you know, what did you do when you went there? And she said, I looked for a husband, right? And I know, and it sounds strange, but the reality was marriage amongst Greeks was an important thing. Being amongst family was an important thing. And particularly, the relevance then was the ability to go there and meet other Greeks, to meet families, when there wasn't these opportunities. The social opportunities didn't exist. This slide the slide as well as showing the Orpheus Club fundamentally gives you an impression of family togetherness during that period. And I say that to you now as I grow up and I've got my children, and I sit down and say to them, why don't you come to an event? Why don't you come to something we're going to go to? And I think, again, to just congratulate the Greek community, they're creating these opportunities. Sigovits's family here, all together. It's wonderful. It's something to aspire to. And reality is, you know, it's the sort of thing we all should be doing, trying to find opportunities to engage with the community. So I want to move on to the next slide. And this is a different generation. So the generation, that was the Antipodes Festival, the first one that we held in Lonsdale Street. You can see Bob Hawke. But I put that slide up there not to show the Antipodes Festival, but to show two men that worked very hard to create pathways for a lot of young people coming out of NUGAS, a lot of youth, to actually get involved in the community. Those pathways are the crucial part, and the two bits that I wanted to leave you with today was about relevance. What we need to do is ensure that the community remains relevant, and I think the Greek community have done a wonderful job. But importantly, NUGAS leaders, NUGAS committee, need to do as much as they can to ensure that the relevance of your connection to the work you're going to do within the community, to the work you're going to do generically, not just the Greek community, but the reality is that we're trying to actually make connections. And look, I'm absolutely so blessed and pleased to see the faces here tonight. I actually, when I asked the question, how many people were going to be here, I was, I suppose, quite surprised. And I'm really surprised that everybody's turned out with the interest. It says to you that there is an interest in what's going on. So as I said to you, the shot down the bottom, a past president, but there were many organisations, many youth groups in those days. But I show that, as I said to you, because that generation, it had a strength. Fundamentally, it was, as I said to you, it was very different. Modern Greek was an issue. There were political issues, a lot of things that we actually had to strive to actually achieve. So those sorts of things led us to stay in NUGAS. But we all, and many of the committee, both men and women, I have to say to you, if there's one thing I have to say about NUGAS over the years, and I hope it's still the same, the fundamental gender split has always been wonderful. And I hope to God it's still the same. Is it? Sure. Well, I hope if it's not, there's enough women here tonight that it's an important aspect of what we do. Gender and getting involved in this sport, in NUGAS is very crucial. So, as I said to you, community leaders have helped in the past. They made sure that Antipodes was open to us. They made sure that Greek Festival was open to us. They made sure that the Greek welfare opportunities were there. There were chances to get involved and gain the sort of experiences that many of the presidents will speak about and many of the board will speak about, that you just don't get those opportunities in business for another 5 to 10 years. NUGAS provides you, and did provide you, an opportunity to actually get involved and actually start to learn a little bit about business and what it means. The last slide is of a recent ball held a few months back. If you look closely enough, you'll find my daughter amongst that wonderful crowd, somewhere in there. Notwithstanding she hasn't finished VCE yet, but she was at her first NUGAS function. and I was very proud. And as I said to you, and I'm hoping that she similarly will see the opportunities that NUGAS gave me and follow in the same footsteps. What I realise about that crowd is that the passion hasn't changed. The passion for what is Greek Australian still exists. And reality is that passion has to be focused to also continue on and get involved in the things that Bill spoke about. Ensuring that NUGAS remains relevant and that the pathways to involvement within the Greek community are essential. I want to give you a good example, and I think that the community, and certainly NUGAS working together with the community, should be able to do a few of these things. Haki, in recent times, did two very good things, both upwards and downwards. The upwards part was that they fundamentally got all their old presidents together and created a council. And that council provides wisdom, leadership, support, all the sorts of things. And I say to NUGAS, and I'm going to say this again to the board, we've offered this many, many times. And I say it again, it's a really good thing to do. Bring the old presidents together, bring the old boards together. The amount of support that they're willing to provide you, and I think, as I said to you, opportunities, engagement, apprenticeships, work, mentoring, all those sorts of things are there to be taken. The second thing they did, and that was Haki, was that they started a mentoring program. I've been very fortunate. My mentee's here, I think it's Chris, and they started, and excuse me as I sweat up here because it's pretty hot. They started a mentoring program, and it's a wonderful, absolutely wonderful initiative, and the connection that it's provided for those people who have just graduated to Haki, and those people going to Haki's events and becoming involved. And so I put that out there as, again, another issue that I think needs to be sorted out, or at least to be addressed with NUGAS, is to try to create that bridge from when you're at uni to getting into the workplace. That bridge is an important one. And it's not only that bridge, it's a bridge of mentoring, a bridge of trying to give you people that have been there ahead of you. And I say to you, the Harvard Business School at the moment talks about this, of having a personal board of directors. And I say to you that any success I've had in my life has always been through the mentors that I had. I was very, very blessed from day one, first job, to today. I've had a mentor in every one of those jobs. And I say to you, and from NUGAS's point of view, create these relationships. Create these relationships with past presidents, past boards. It's really, really important, just as Haki have done with their mentoring. So as I close off, and I'll say to you, from a community and a youth point of view, the stature and history of NUGAS goes 47 years, I believe, and Greek community 120 years. To have kept these organisations going is an immense, immense, immense congratulations to the people that are in this room, to the board, which I mentioned for the Greek community, but to many past people that you saw in the photos there. We should never take for granted what we have here in Australia. We should all be incredibly grateful for that first generation, for what they set up as Greek Australians. We take it for granted a lot of times, but this city, this country, what it has for Greek Australians, and that gift that our parents and our grandparents gave us is absolutely gold. It's precious, but one thing, it brings with it responsibility. And that responsibility, in my mind, is an obligation for each of you. Get involved. Get involved in the things you saw Bill's got up there. Get involved in NUGAS. Help out with the board. Do what you can. And seek good mentors. As I said, the points that I put up there are two. Things need to remain relevant for NUGAS and for the Kinota, and for all these things to continue. We need to remain relevant. Community's done a wonderful job at that. NUGAS needs to continue to do that. And the second thing we need to do is create pathways. And if I can help along the way, I will. I say to you, we should be very proud that we're all here tonight, because it says there is an interest in the Greek community, there is an interest in Greek Australian affairs, and there is an interest in NUGAS. Thank you.
And that's the essence of it. Inspirational words. Thank you, Peter. especially remarkably that we have to acknowledge our heritage and the history we have through an organisation like NUGAS, particularly those origins, where we began and why we're here. In a few moments, we'll watch a brief video of a collection of interviews from various NUGAS alumni as they share their thoughts on the purpose of the organisation, their experiences, and the challenges that they had faced in their time.
When I started studying, I needed support, and I found that support in an organization that was called the Greek Students Association. It was definitely for university students. The association was established basically to encourage social interaction. It served also the purposes of young boys and girls connecting. One of the key things that we initiated, which is interesting, it tells the story of the needs of the time, was to make a submission to the Greek government. I remember going to the Greek consulate, myself and a couple of other people on the committee, and we made a submission for the Greek government to recognise academic qualifications obtained at Australian universities.
My background is that I'm Australian born. My mother was Australian born, of Greek heritage. Father was born in Greece, but it's interesting that I came from a different background to a number of people that were involved with the Greek club at Melbourne Uni. And I felt that I was in conflict with the position that they were adopting, where they were more concerned about PASOK, Nea Demokratia, KKE, and all the other political parties of Greece. I got involved with Melbourne University Greek Club, became president, and effectively changed the landscape in that we became a more broader, mainstream organisation. At the time, which would have been in the 70s, there were conventions that were being conducted, but they were under a rather de facto umbrella arrangement in which each state would host a convention, but it was called just the National Convention of Greek Australian Students. In 1976, we decided as a consequence that it was better to formalise the convention structure, and as a consequence, NUGAS was created, and I had the pleasure of being the first president of NUGAS for 4 years. We were more structured. We were in a position where we actually got grants to have a part-time administration, but it was a national organisation with state membership.
Constitution was, there was a national constitution, and then there was all the clubs. There were regional officers, which were effectively like state presidents, but there wasn't really a formalised thing. And it was only when I first got involved that we formalised that with the constitution, and I was actually the first state president in 1987. NUGAS generally brought people together, and you know, we tried to work for the good of everybody. Of course, you know, people would go off on little tangents and support their little causes or their cause, whatever that might have been. And, you know, some people were more interested, for instance, in social events, you know, nightclubs, balls, this sort of stuff. Others were more interested in cultural stuff, you know, producing, you know, maybe doing theatrical things or more cultural activities. So I think the whole process of NUGAS, and what we tried to do at the time is to bring everybody together. That one was not necessarily needed to be done at the detriment of another thing, that because I think NUGAS should be about all those things. It should be about bringing people together, and I think it succeeded for many, many years.
My major interest in NUGAS because of what NUGAS stands for. NUGAS as a brand, if you like, has huge responsibilities, and as a consequence, at least in those early days, it played a major role in the formation of policy, lobby, etc. in the Greek community. We were the first national organisation in Australia. Yes, we were the first national organisation in Australia, national representation. NUGAS was the first organisation to have a policy on a number of the Greek national issues. For example, national service, Cyprus, Macedonia. No other organisation had specific policies in those areas. Recognition of degrees was the other one. We played a major role. You know, once upon a time, people don't realise, once upon a time, it used to take 2 or 3 years to get your degree recognised, qualifications recognised in Greece. Now it happens within 6 months. And people can thank NUGAS for that. National service. There were no provisions for reducing national service for people in the Greeks in the diaspora.
It was an interesting time at Melbourne University then. There was a lot of interest in the Greek Club. There was a lot of interest in the Modern Greek Students Association. There was a lot of interest in NUGAS back then. There was a large group of us that back then felt that NUGAS should be more than just a social organisation. Fair enough. An integral part of it.
We'll continue that in a brief time. Because now, sorry Theo, you can come up and talk afterwards. Good. But for now, we'll begin our panel discussion. So I've got to have the panelists step up to the stage, please. So with us tonight, we have our 4 fantastic panelists, 3 former NUGAS committee members and 1 very former NUGAS committee member. From right to left, we have Tas Skardelis. Tas has been involved in NUGAS since 2012, holding positions such as NUGAS Victoria State Council Representative, NUGAS Victoria President, NUGAS National Education Officer, and NUGAS National Policy Officer. Secondly, we have Phil Vass. Phil is a former member of MHSS, NUGAS Victoria Executive and NUGAS National Committees from 2009 until 2011. He currently sits on and is the youngest member of the Greek Community of Melbourne Board since 2013. Phil has assisted with the development of the Greek Centre, been involved in the rezoning of the Bulleen property, and is presently working on the refit of the Level 3 Greek Community Clubhouse. He has a bachelor and a master's in construction law and works as an associate at Moran Agnew Lawyers. Thirdly, we have Alexa Georgiou. She's a former national NUGAS president, 2010 to 2012, and has a master's degree in property and development and investment, and a bachelor's in town planning and construction. Alexa has worked for property and construction companies, including Built & Lang, O'Rourke, before moving to Singapore to work in technology and venture capital. She now works with the Hellenic Initiative and has led a successful One Greece national philanthropic endeavour. And that is in partnership also with Peter Abraham. Peter, your time with the Hellenic Initiative has only just begun, quite recently, hasn't it? There you go. So welcome our panellists, guys. Over here now. Oh, it's working now. All right. So, our objective with our time tonight is to share the thoughts on the relevance of the Greek identity amongst the Neolea and consider the future of the involvement of the Greek youth in the community. And specifically, consider the question, is it necessary to respond to the changing needs of the younger generations and therefore adopt a new notion of Greek identity? So to begin with, where does being Greek fit into the youth of today? And this is open to any of our panellists.
Current board member?
So I think I've been delegated first speaker. I think it's as relevant as ever. The one item that I think is most relevant above all, and Bill and Peter really drove this home, is that on one hand we're here celebrating what we call the Neolea, but on the other hand, all the opportunities that you've seen up on the screen and been talked about are available to you and ready for you to step in at any point in time. And so I think on one hand it's good to recognise the changing needs of the youth, but the needs of the youth and what the youth can be involved in are no different to what the community at large can be involved in. And a lot of that is giving back. When I joined the Greek Community Board, I was astounded at the amount of interest from, yes, the first generation and the second generation, and we do owe it to them to meet their needs, but at the same time also recognising that by creating this building and taking a few steps forward, such as the Bulleen project, we do need to recognise ongoing needs. So I'll hand over to perhaps Lex, who I served on NUGAS with for a number of years.
What can you tell us, Lex, about your experiences and perhaps those benefits of being a part of an organisation like NUGAS?
It's really about the future of the Greek community, not just in Melbourne, Victoria, but Australia and around the world. We create so many opportunities to... I remember in my time in NUGAS, we created a lot of opportunities for our committee to become leaders. Philip being a perfect example of that, who is now doing amazing things with the Greek community of Melbourne, but I can name 10 or so others. Jack is in the room. Jack was before my time, but he's definitely a leader in what he does in his field, but also in the community as well. Peter Abram to my left, perfect example of someone that was in NUGAS, made the most of their time, and now has gone out and done incredible things in his career, and now come back and is giving a lot to the community. And that's what I think it is about, the future leaders and the future of our community.
So would you say that your time in NUGAS, or to anyone, that time spent in NUGAS somewhat shapes how they identify themselves? So that's those benefits that they take in their career, their personal life, and they draw on from what exactly? What did you draw upon in your time as NUGAS, in NUGAS?
Personally, I drew upon the connection to the past of the Greek community in Australia, the past of Greek history. We have a lot to learn there, and connecting it to the future. If every one of us don't do that, we won't have any of this to talk about in 40 and 120 years' time.
Thanks.
You can add that as well.
Yeah, no, look, the thing I suppose I'd like to say is that one of the great things that NUGAS did, not only as a committee member, but whether you're a committee member on a school, on one of the university Greek clubs, you didn't have to be on the NUGAS board. One of it was the things that matter about are consultation, working with people. Careers are going to change. We've all heard futurists are talking to us about new jobs. Accountancy won't be around. There's going to be a number of jobs that just won't exist. Might be past your time. But the reality is that jobs are changing. And people are hiring nowadays not on what you've learnt, not on your profession, but they're hiring on the person. Bill said it before. Fundamentally, it is about the person. And I think that all that I'd like to say again about connecting is that these opportunities, not just being in, we can sit up here and you've got presidents who have sat on boards and that's not for everybody. It's not for everybody in this crowd. Not everybody wants to give up the time that we did. And I don't have any issue with that. But being involved at a local level, getting involved in supporting whatever else you can. The community have not put on this night without, I suppose, a strategic reason. They're realising in time that the committee in itself is going to need to change. You need to be looking at succession. So all I'd say to again, in terms of the connection, you've got a wonderful opportunity as Greek Australians where there's so many structures that you can easily fit into and where people are accepting. And so take advantage of those as much as you can. It gives you a wonderful connection to your, as I said, to your heritage.
And that's the interesting point of it all, that there are structures within the Greek community that exist that have been there for a number of years, formed by people such as yourself, Peter. Within those structures, and we open this to the audience, to consider the question of what relevance do those structures have to the youth of today, beyond career, beyond their own personal development. Do those structures have relevance in terms of how they form their own identity, their own Greek Australian identity?
And it links back to the first question you asked as well with what does it mean to be Greek in the community today? And I think that's where the major place for NUGAS is because everyone who I've spoken to in the last few days, doing these interviews, available online if you really, don't worry. And everyone's got a different definition of what it means to be Greek, yeah? And not one single person said it's to be born in Greece. So, what does that mean? That means, well, when I was in primary school, I had one idea, yeah? One of the only Greeks in the school. Went to high school is another idea, and you start to associate with different people. You get into university, and it's like, where am I? What am I doing? And that's really where you start to try new things and find yourself. And that's where you start to redefine what it means to be Greek and speak to different people, associate with different people. And then that structure that NUGAS creates points you in all these different directions and really broadens your horizons, broadens your mind, establishes these connections, and really reshapes what it means for you personally and what it means for you within the community to be Greek. And that's changing, and you have to adapt. And I'm sure we'll speak more about that.
Do you have something to add, Phil?
Not particularly on that point. I think Tass summarised it pretty well, and I think my involvement with NUGAS was quite spontaneous. I went from first year of having absolutely zero interest in any involvement, and I sort of just took the plunge and didn't really get out at the other end, because I found that within such a wide circle, be it NUGAS, be it the Greek community, be it Haki, be it THI, we've pretty much got all bases covered. And I think you can find some part of identity that you do relate to about Greece or your heritage in one of the organisations. And the best thing about it is that they all coexist pretty harmoniously, which I think is one of the most unique things about any culture that you look at, is that you can be a member of all of them and they all serve different purposes, different needs, and they all do largely a great job of it.
So those aspects of culture... Absolutely. Those aspects of culture, I imagine you're going to talk about in just a second, that you can appreciate in any part of any of these organisations. Do you feel that particularly they are marginalised to a particular type? Is it a traditional aspect? Is it a moral aspect? Is it a value-based aspect that you identify as Greek? Have you found that it's solely because of the environment that you were in, or was it something inherently based?
All those organisations are there for different purposes. The Hellenic Initiative, whilst it is doing great work, it's essentially there to help the people of Greece. We run various programs such as bringing out interns or Greek graduates from Greece to intern in Greek companies, or as what Peter is in charge of, our crisis relief program, and sending money over to Greece to organisations that distribute 25,000 food portions a day. That serves a completely different purpose to Haki, which is a chamber of commerce for Greek business, and the Greek community of Melbourne, which essentially serves 10 different purposes, be it welfare, religion, everything else. So they all form different purposes, and you can work out what you're interested in and base your interests, and then go on that, and then go into whichever organisation you feel fits within that purpose. But they will all connect you to being the different definition of Greek that you identify with, as Tass was saying.
Excellent. I heard from the audience someone say religion, which is always an interesting topic to discuss. Is that the question of, and this is to the panel as well, that as we progress, from the first generation to the third, it's commonly said that these traditions, these values, the essence that our parents and grandparents have said of being Greek will soon disappear. Is that going to be an issue for the future, do you believe, in terms of recognizing, say, for example, the Holy Liturgia, knowing the particular Yortes at church? Perhaps it's also extending to other things like name days or anything else like that. Is that going to become something irrelevant amongst the latter generations?
I guess not as long as people are not getting married or not christening their children. There'll still be a role for religion. It's interesting to see. I'm originally from Brisbane. There are only 3 Greek churches in the whole of Brisbane, and they're packed every weekend because we've seen this resurgence in the Greek community up there, that people, particularly the younger generations, want to connect their children with religion. So it's lovely to see that they're taking their children to Saturday night services in English and connecting on another level, which I don't know if it happens in Sydney as much, but I'm sure it is happening in Melbourne as well. You can probably speak more to it.
Yeah, on that question, I think from my point of view at least, there's been a historic real emphasis on trying to preserve these traditions and values and name days and holy days and what have you that the first generation brought out with them. And I take quite a bit of interest in what Greece is like now. And I think that, yes, we need to preserve and acknowledge our heritage, but it's not, I think that question is somewhat archaic as well, because you sort of look to Greece as well and you say, well, what are they doing? What are the issues confronting them? What are the issues that they bring out with them when they come here? And I think that's quite an interesting area. And, you know, in some respects they're quite more modern than us, in others they're backwards. But, you know, I think just because we don't preserve those key things that we were raised with necessarily doesn't mean you lose all identity. And there's other ways to chase your identity and find it and connect with Greece.
It's interesting that you don't have to be religious to be Greek. You don't have to speak Greek to be Greek. You have to be born in Greece to be Greek. So what does it mean to be Greek? And again, it's different for everybody. For some people, it's a combination of these things. For some people, it's one of these things. It's visiting Greece every year. It's, you know, that's the beauty of it. It's not one thing that pigeonholes a whole community, and that's why we're so broad and diverse, and that's an amazing thing. And that's something that should be encouraged. And the reality is that there will be fewer churches in 20 years than there are today. Okay, and that's okay. Like, we can deal with that as a community. So I definitely believe that we really need to start thinking of Greek culture as broader than these narrow historical things that we've been clinging on to.
I think it's important to be aware of that and definitely know it and pay respect and understand it. But completely agree with what Tash just said. Peter? No.
That's the handball.
It's an interesting question. The reality is keeping language, keeping culture, and Greek church and orthodoxy in many ways is part of culture now, to be fair, because many people go to church not always for the right reasons and fundamentally for religious reasons. They go for cultural reasons because it's expected, because it's what you do with your family. And I think that that's an interesting aspect of what we do. But it is in itself, whether religious or whether for those cultural reasons, it's a reason about keeping together in a community that you love and you respect. So I think Taz's point is right. Being Greek is what you want it to be for yourself. Some of us carry our Greek Australian heritage on our sleeves, some of us carry it on our hearts. And I'm friends with many people across that whole spectrum of how they see themselves. You know, I'm just going to say to Jordan, it'd be good to open it up to the crowd to ask some of those questions, because, again, for me, I sit up here as a person who's been through it. It was important for me. I can say to you, my mother was born here. I didn't speak Greek. I learned to speak Greek because of NUGAS, and fundamentally being able to have actually make a speech in Greek. First words I learnt were Ethniki Enosi Ellinostallon Fididon. There you go. So, and it was one of the first things that I learnt. And the reality is that Greek came because of that side of things. And it's hard for me to ever express it to you, and I say it to you in the crowd, but your Greekness, your involvement is derived from what you get involved in. It's not derived from which hora you're from or the language you learn. It's from what you're going to get involved in. If I'm proud of anything, it's not Greek history. I'm proud of Greek Australian history. I'm proud of what my grandparents did here in the 30s and 40s. And I collect everything you saw. I've got photos of the boats that they came on. I've got all those sorts of things. It's an immense pride. And I hope, some of you are probably the age of my daughter. So I say to you, I hope you're going to be equally as proud of your parents and what they've achieved, because they will have. And you take Bill and you take the other committee members that are here. This took an amazing amount. This one night we raised in this room $1 million to finish this building. It was an immense challenge. We raised $1.2 million a few weeks ago over a week across Australia for Greece. And a lot of people ask the question, why were we raising money for Greece? Why aren't we raising it for Yerokomia and other things here? Because the reality is we were giving money to those who are destitute, those people who are absolutely trodden on, nothing to eat, no clothes. And the reality is the question was asked, if we do nothing, are we really doing... And that questioned a lot of people who I grew up with here about their Greekness. Because for me, being Greek is about Greek Australia, more so than anything else. But it's certainly captured my attention. So I think Tass's point's right. We all are Greek in a very different way. But I say to you, and I know I've harped on this tonight, and I want to leave it because I continue to say it to many people who are involved, get involved. Get involved wherever you can. It doesn't have to be on the board of NUGAS, but involved in the Greek, because it is going to change over time. The longer we keep this, the longer we've got that aspiration that our kids, and I say it right now, my mum let me off going to Greek school. I've never forgiven her. My daughter goes to Greek school every week, and they continue to do it, and I hope she'll say thank you one day. And I think that's the way...
So with that, we'll open up questions from the audience to ask. Hands up. Sava.
To me, Greekness or Hellenism has to do, you talk about family before. Family is very important. If we see ourselves as belonging, as we see our own personal family, as belonging to a Greek family, meaning Greek Australians or Greeks in the diaspora all around the world, and feeling that need of wanting to belong to something and helping each other and fostering the philosophy of Greeks loving Greeks, Greeks helping Greeks, Greeks supporting Greeks, and a love for all things Greek. And that encompasses for some of us the Greek language, ancient Greek history, or Christianity, whereas for me the ancient Greek religion, so be it. But we do belong to a Hellenic family, and I'd like to say to you, have we ever thought about taking into aspects of our ancient culture? You know, philanthropy and having benefactors started in ancient Greek. The ancient Greek schools were not supported by government, they were private schools, parents paying fees and benefactors donating money. So the essence of teaching our children in the school system and in our organizations what philanthropy means, what volunteerism means, and what being a benefactor means is very important. Are we doing that? Should we be doing that? Should we be putting resources into something like that and make that part of a Greek school curriculum?
Absolutely. Peter and I were just saying that's exactly what the Hellenic Initiative is all about. It is all those things combined: philanthropy, volunteerism, giving back, personal development, professional development. Peter alluded to it earlier, we've raised $1.1 million around the country in 5 different events. And I was so proud to see philanthropy in Australia, in the Greek Australian community, alive well. We had an anonymous donation of $500,000 come about during that time, and it was very humbling to see just all the different people, thousands across the country, want to give back, not just to the Greek community here, but to the people of Greece who do need it. Peter's very involved in our crisis relief program, which amongst, as I said before, gives to homeless people in Greece, and there's a food bank, as I said, 25,000 portions of food per day, but also gives resources such as blankets and medical supplies and everything else, and everyone's contributions to that fundraising campaign are going straight into those efforts.
So just to your point, because it's an important one, just about philanthropy and philoxenia. I was very fortunate to be in Athens, and as part of the work we do with THI, we have to do some diligence on all the charities. So we ensure that the money's going to, wonderful places. And Greece cops a lot of criticism at times, but I have to say the week I spent in Athens is probably the best week I've ever spent. And it was in the heart of Athens, 2 or 3 days in Bidhouse with the homeless. But one of the things I learned, I went out to a session with a group that we gave them about 180,000 over the last 3 years. And they've started a campaign in schools, and I saw one of the best curriculums ever written on volunteerism and effectively getting involved and philanthropy. And this has been written for Greek kids to start from early age, year 3, right through to high school. And I haven't seen a curriculum of that nature globally, let alone before, that at school age, it was all starting to be pushed. And they were doing it, and again, it just shows you that aspect of Greece. I try to share that occasionally because, as I said, I'm very Greek-Australian with an emphasis on the Australian. But this opportunity, and why does THI come across, and why am I getting involved in THI? Because I got involved with Kinotid before that. Why did I get involved in Kinotid? Because I got involved with NUGAS before that. These things lead on to opportunities. They come with business too, and don't get me wrong, you meet lots of good people, but they were never anything that made me any richer. But it made me culturally more rich. So I say to you, philanthropy is an important part. As a community, we've done a great job. The people that put their money to get this building up, and who will now, get involved with Evangelismos. If you have an interest in the church, Bill's put up projects there that need the support of all of us to get there. So I think your philanthropy comment is a very valid one.
Acknowledging that as an aspect of Greek culture, and calling back to what you said about that hyphenated identity being Greek-Australian, what does it actually mean now for the third generation to be Greek-Australian? And that's Tass or Phil.
It's pretty hard to answer it directly because I'm not going to prescribe what should be Greek-Australian to anyone here. The fact that you're here suggests that there's something about you that you identify with enough to bring you here tonight. And you may all differ in what some part of that is, be it language, be it dance, be it culture, be it trade or networking even. But you're all here for a particular reason, and I think so long as you acknowledge that reason and you do something to perpetuate it, that's the key thing, to actually get involved and make sure that whatever inspired you to come here tonight, you make sure you can bring 10 people in to do the same and even more. And then that's how you perpetuate your identity. And you will find others, like-minded people, and you'll bring them along for the ride. And then there'll be people that you'll know for years, you'll run into after a long time not having seen. And there's your identity and there's your network.
Das?
Linking together a few of the last points, I'd like to say that it was a big issue for us, how we look at identity and how we apply that to what we do in NUGAS Summit, when we're part of it. So we had events coming up, and who do we market to? Is it just our members? Is it just people who speak Greek? So we had to start thinking about, what does that mean? What's our role in this? So in my opinion, I think it equally, just as much as it is about passing on all this and promoting Hellenism within people with Greek background, it's also to sparking that interest within our friends at university, our future workmates, and building those bridges outside of our community. Because if we live in this cocoon and it's, you've got all the benefits within it, but if you don't move outside that and learn how to use that to your advantage, then it's to your own detriment. So I think that we shouldn't use Greek Australian as a limiting factor, but as a something to build off.
And extending on what Tass said, it's really key to acknowledge that our Greek Australian identity also needs to involve embracing anyone that wants to be a part of it, regardless of how they see their connection to Greece. And we've got Nick Dallas here, who could probably tell us about the stats of Greeks or third or fourth generation non-Greeks in the education sector, running Greek schools, and just the amount of non-Greeks that would come to the NUGAS ball. It was unbelievable. And we really do need to put ourselves out there and lead the way for other cultures.
Absolutely. Were there another question from the audience? Alex. So there are things being done. And to pass to the panel, the question was, considering the prevailing issue of lessening interest in studying the Greek language at a high school, even tertiary level, what should or could be done from now to ensure that it continues for the next 10 to 20 years, for example?
I think Leo's really captured what I was about to say, which is that we do need to look at other streams, largely to cater for an incoming number of Greek migrants as well, because that's to their advantage as well and to ours. I think ancient Greek is something that, from the Greek community's point of view, it's there, but we need to push a bit more. I think it's a great asset and something that we can really lead, particularly given how much it's on the decline in non-Greek independent schools, from what I understand. But yeah, I think language is making a resurgence in the non-VC areas as well. Speak to Nick Dallas as well about the numbers.
To interject there, and this is to the entire panel, has a dominance of English and Western culture perhaps affected the youth of today in their interest towards speaking Greek and adopting identifying factors of Greek identity?
In general terms, I don't think so. Insofar as language is concerned, I think it's purely a time commitment issue and a HSC VCE issue at the end of the day, and that needs to be addressed.
Tass.
So we've had countless meetings with Monash over the years, and many people have had many other discussions. So they're cutting courses because people aren't taking them. Why aren't people taking them? Because they're not interested, doesn't fit in their course, yada, a million reasons. So you have to target people when they're younger, and we have to get better at making the better arguments for taking Greek. It can't be because you have to, or because don't you want to speak to your grandparents, which great reasons, but you know that they're not going to work in the future. So we're going to have to come up with, make better cases for the academic reasons, you know, broadening of culture, linguistic, etc., and we have to get better at marketing towards people outside of community as well. Because it is such a fundamental and historically important language that, and we have such a strong community here in Melbourne that it's absurd that we're losing the language in this, the third biggest Greek city in the world. It's crazy.
Does that mean then, is our identity in crisis? Is there a crisis currently occurring?
No, I don't think so. The numbers of the NUGAS ball seem like they're raising every year.
Yeah.
From the ball, can I just give credit to Jack, who started the first ball 12 years ago? Yeah, about that. I think it was only a few hundred that went back then. And how many were they this year?
Nick?
900.
Yeah, there you go. And it's fluctuated around those numbers at the 900 mark for the past few years.
You can get anywhere from 1,000. Like Elena had over 1,000. And she was like only 4 years after the first one. But my question to you, sort of as an aside, is I was Greek. I was national president. I'm a life member. I can't speak Greek. How?
Likewise.
Yeah. There's two up there that I know for certain didn't speak Greek when they started. And Sasha as well. How distinct to us is language and culture separate to being Greek? Like, we've all spoken English here tonight. We haven't spoken, like, maybe a dozen words of Greek the whole time. This whole discussion has been, does speaking Greek mean being Greek and feeling Greek? Not in my mind. Is it in yours? But what brought you here? It wasn't obviously speaking Greek.
No, I've never been able to speak Greek, so and I identify with being Greek Australian just as Peter does more than anything. I wear it in my heart more than my sleeve, equally both. I asked the same question to I won't mention the man's name, but a leader in your Greek community in Melbourne today, and he said, my children do not speak Greek, but it runs in their blood and their veins, and I don't believe, while I believe preserving the language is very important, I don't think it is the be-all and end-all to being a good Greek Australian and contributing to the community.
I think it's a hard question you ask, because I think the reality is that if you suggest that it's not important for yourself, or it might not be important for Lex, the important part is that it could be important for others. So I think that yeah, I'm just sort of trying to go back to Alex's question, which he asked, and my first question was going to be, get inside the tent and fix it. And this is what I say about all these things that we bring up. The reality is, if you feel a certain way about these sorts of things, you feel a certain way about Greece, you get inside, you try and do something. And I put that out there in that, language, it's important to me right now that they give it a go. It's important that my kids try and there's no doubt, we have crying every weekend. We're going to Greek school, right? And not to all Greek schools, and I'm sure not those Greek schools are good, but it does happen. And at the end of the day, it's a certain desire you've got. We're all individuals in how we do it. I regret the fact that I didn't go. To me, lucky enough, I was able to pick it up and I was able to converse, and I can converse very, very well. But the reality is that I just think that it's important, what was said before, as Greek Australians, it's these connections that keep us Greek. It's the friendship groups. It's the people we work with. It's the committees that we're involved in. As you said, you don't need to speak Greek. Lex has been working for THI, the Hellenic Initiative, for a year and a half? About a year and a half. It hasn't been important. I mean, it hasn't made a difference to her capability of putting on a wonderful tour that we did recently, her getting involved in some of those things. But there are other people on the board who speak Greek fluently. It's that mix. I go back to, it's why NUGAS is important. It's why the Greek clubs are important. It's why it's family, it's associations. It's when you meet another professional of your own. I still do it. I've travelled the world. When I see a Greek out there, I don't care if I don't know them. I'll walk up to them and say, I know your name's Greek. What do you do? I'd love to know you. I'd love to know what you're doing. It's this connection that we have. And it doesn't matter, I can speak half-broken Greek to them, and they'll always say when I go over and speak Greek, they say, you were born there and your mother was born there, and how can you speak Greek? So, it is each to their own. But the linking part about all this is having NUGAS balls. It's having those sorts of events. It's having functions. It's keeping together. It's the barreras that we create. They're the things that are going to keep us together. And the Quinota is just another one of those, about getting involved and being part of something that is family.
Calling back to the issue of language, Tass, what do you think about this?
I don't know if I have too much more to add.
No?
No, let's move on.
Beautiful. So, Sasha, I believe, did you have a question?
I've got a question because, like, in the last 5 minutes, I had rewriting of history, and I would like to understand. I went to a NUGAS meeting a couple of weeks ago, and I saw 20 enthusiastic people who didn't understand their own history. Why should NUGAS preserve its history?
Which history? History of NUGAS.
The history of NUGAS.
Who's saying they shouldn't preserve the history of the organisation?
Why should NUGAS preserve its history? It's like in the last 5 minutes I heard the rewriting of our history. That the first NUGAS ball existed what?
2008 was the first one that we held.
Okay. Was that the first NUGAS ball?
So there'd be a number, certainly, there'd be a number of different...
What happened in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s, in the 2000s? Right? It wasn't the first NUGAS ball.
Perspectives on the issue.
And I spoke to this committee and I said, you don't understand your history, and how do you understand what your right is?
So considering history, guys, and the importance of it, what does it mean?
So that's something that's very special to me. It's something I only found out about news through my parents. Yeah, and the stories they told. Yeah. All right, you've been noticed. All right. So why was that important? Because they told me stories about, oh, they had Greece trips back then. Oh, that's where I met such and such. Oh, I still know this person because I met through uni, and that's, So those things are important. So when I first, entered NUGAS and became president, I went through the archives. I got dumped 10 boxes of things. That's how things get passed on, which is wrong. That needs a change. We're working on it. Now, I also reached out to many people. Not enough people, but many people. So what benefit did all this have? It gave me sparked the idea to bring back the Greece trip. Yeah, we now are going next year. We're working on the 3rd year of the return of the NUGAS Greece tour, where students go to Aristoteli Pampistimio in Thessaloniki to learn Greek language and have a tour guide all around mainland Greece, where they see all the historical sites. So that's one important thing that came from that. The NUGAS Cup. I've heard about this many times throughout history. We never had this unified concept. These are small things, but there's definitely much to be learnt from our history. We have such a huge history, nearly 50 years, which is crazy. So that there is definitely a huge benefit to going back, understanding what mistakes we've made in the past so we don't make them again. Everything is cyclical within our community.
And I think some of the most significant history for NUGAS is the unwritten one. A lot of emphasis is placed on the important things that are archived, the balls, the other events, the trips. And they're the things that my parents also went on about. But I also remember simply people referring to being involved. And they didn't point to one particular event, and they didn't point to, saying, oh, I went to the ball and didn't get involved. They said, get involved. And I remember as a child, you probably don't, being introduced to you at the Antipodes Festival. And I said, oh, how do you know that guy, Mum? And she said, oh, back from NUGAS days. I had no idea what NUGAS was. But then when I got into NUGAS, I found a nuclear disarmament policy with Peter Abrahams written on it. I said, oh, I remember that guy. And then I got involved, and now I see Peter every now and then. And we've both got common interests or views on a lot of what we're doing here. And I think that's the most important thing about NUGAS history and Greek community history and the history that THI is now paving. There are all those significant discrete events, but the history is everyone that's been through it and has got something to say and got in the tent and changed something about it.
I take back my statement about the ball. The new balls, or the new generation of balls, started with Jack, but I acknowledge that there were balls before that. Before Jack, though, there was a bit of a lull period, and Jack was a huge contributor of bringing that back in Victoria and nationally. What is the importance of preserving the history? It's everything to understanding what has been done to where it could keep going and what you could do. I never realised that apart from Alina, every other president before me had been a male. and I love that there's been several females after me. I didn't meet many other presidents until we had the 40th anniversary. This was where I met Sasha for the first time, where I met Peter, where I met Nick Zervos, who now is on our board of the Hellenic Initiative, as are many other NUGAS alumni. So it's about also understanding your culture and your identity as a Greek Australian, understanding the history of NUGAS.
That's right. So on that note of culture and Greek identity, were there any other questions from the audience? Stelio.
Well, I think that, there's been a big emphasis on, teaching kids Greek in schools and at a university level and things like that. But, like my parents, they were born overseas. They came to Greece came to Australia in the late 80s. And the thing is, I feel like there's no emphasis that once you go beyond your university life or your school life, what is the organisation doing to ensure that these people stay in their 30s or in their 40s, continuing the culture, preserving the culture? Like, if it's not practiced, if it's not remembered, it's forgotten, it's put aside. And unfortunately, I can sort of speak on behalf of my parents, even though they came older. My dad, he came like in his mid to late 20s. Even though we speak Greek at home and we try to remember our culture, he feels like he's been put aside in the sense that there's nothing there for people of that age as the emphasis placed on younger kids and people at a university level. So is there anything that the community is doing or aims to do to integrate the older generation, or I should say some of the older people into Greek?
So I think
things like that.
This is our starting point of view. That's what this is. When we started out, I started out as past student with PEP. I was outside of that realm of still being a student. I had finished. But we've got to hear people, young people that are coming into here, being at the youth, being at school, being at high school, being at uni, to join, to learn a little bit. They're not going to be able to speak the language, all the customs and everything else. Guys, forget that. You will learn as much as you can. You will learn to speak the Greek language. Like the Greeks learn to speak English over there. Maybe worse, whatever. But we understand that, and we have to try and pass that on to our children, on to you. And you guys should be using the elders of these groups, the Greek community, NUGAS, the older people, gain from their wisdom, and adapt it to your lifestyles. As you grow up, the circumstances change. We are no longer dealing with, or you are no longer dealing with our parents, that generation. We are a little bit more open-minded as such. So you gain their wisdom, which wisdom comes with age, and then learn and improve on it.
Stelio, as for your father's generation, on any given week at this building, there is so much going on that there's a lecture series every Thursday night, and the issues there that it canvasses are unbelievable. If you go online, I think they're live streamed as well. The topics that I see presented are ones that I could never have thought of or never knew existed as topics. If you come here when the Greek school's operational, it is unbelievable how much traffic comes through this building on a daily basis, and it continues to surprise me at any given moment that I come into this building, and I think there's absolutely something for everyone here culturally.
Yeah, just add, I don't think there's ever been a time, it's interesting enough, that there's been the riches of community organisations working, as I said, strongly enough to provide opportunities. If you think there's something that they're missing, mark my words, I'll be very happy to actually hear from you. I say it about this thing of jumping in the tent. If you want something bad enough, do it yourself.
I know the Greek Film Festival was a good start.
It is, and it's not it's one of the best film festivals. I don't say it with the parochialism. It set the trend for many of the other ethnic film festivals, and it really has done well. So, again, credit to the Greek community, but it's not just them. Haki, the sorts of opportunities, and there are other organisations, many other organisations that are doing wonderful things.
So considering those artefacts, we've mentioned the Greek Film Festival, the Greek Centre itself, even the Antipodes Festival that you helped co-found, Peter. Are they the most important things to maintain over the coming years, or should there be different things done in order to respond to the changes, as we mentioned earlier, that the youth see in their need from a Greek identity or their interest in being Greek?
I think if you look at the evolution of, say, the Antipodes Festival over time, it's not a question of whether or not you preserve it, it's how you slowly adapt it to maintain relevant. And even as at next year's festival, you'll see a lot of new things that you'll think, wow, I didn't realise the Antipodes would have had this featuring in it. And, you know, we brought food trucks in a couple of years ago, and that was a huge success. Even just small changes that you may not notice coming in year out, you will notice if you take note and then follow that trend, and it evolves. It evolves. And so it's not a question of do we preserve it, do we not? It's what do we do to continue to make these things relevant?
And the question is of relevance. How do we maintain relevance of being Greek amongst the youth, or anyone for that matter? Well, the youth, tell us.
What does the youth want? How do they want to see?
More tavern nights?
More parties.
What does the youth want from an organisation like NUGAS?
Great answer.
Call it out.
Maybe it's a better question to ask, what do the youth want from the Greek community?
Correct.
They know what they want from NUGAS, but what do they want from us? I think this is a starting point. I mean, in this room today, I see the leadership of tomorrow's Greek community. And let's be honest about it, Peter, we were there 30 years ago, and we are still around because it's the students that normally play a leadership role in this, and it's very, very important. What's fantastic, being Greek Australians, being diverse. You've got 30 different people here with 30 different opinions about what being Greek Australian is. And what Taz said, never pigeonhole people. Diversity is the most richest aspect of any organisation. And we've got a board of 19 people with 19 different opinions. And it's through that you come to a common conclusion and move your way forward. So that's very, very important. And what we want from the Greek community, what we want from you guys is come and talk to us. That tent that Peter Abraham's talking about, that door's always open. Actually, there's no actual door there. It's constantly open. You can come in 24/7 and we are more than welcome to talk to you. I think yourself, you've seen at this stage basically doing what we're trying to do in regards to the Greek language. Language, you're right, it's an important part. But it's not just the only part about being Greek or Greek Australian. Culture, religion is an important factor. Music, all that plays an important role. We're willing to listen to everybody. So let's look at today as the beginning of something new. And congratulations to you. Congratulations to everyone coming in tonight. It's a fantastic event.
Thank you, Theo.
Just want to add to that you guys in Melbourne are very blessed and call it privileged in a way to have the community that you do. I've travelled around the rest of the country. I've visited almost every other Greek community, and no one does as much as what the Greek community of Melbourne does in each different area. They look after every generation, and there is something from for every aspect of the community. I struggle to see that in Sydney. I live in Sydney now, and I struggle to see that in Brisbane and everywhere else. So you guys do a fantastic job, and to the board of this community, I commend you. You're fantastic. Well done.
Do we have more questions from the audience?
Just quickly, I was going to jump in there. Touching on what Sasha and both Theo said, I think it is important to understand our history. So based on what Sasha said to come down, he spoke to us, that was one perspective of our past, understanding it and moving forward. So in a way as well, I opened our doors. I will come and approach you as well. I see now as good as an opportunity as ever, that I invite you all to come down and speak with us. Maybe twice, once, 4 times a year, we can have someone from our past coming down. We can learn new stuff. Maybe there's events that we had before that we now have been phased out, we can bring back. So just on that, I will be approaching you, getting details, inviting you all down to come down and speak to us. And you guys as well, you're all NUGAS members. You're all invited to our meetings. If you want to learn more, come down to our meetings and get engaged. And basically, we are moving forward. So we want to learn from our past and then go forward.
That's good. Can I make a suggestion to make it a little bit easier? The looser the arrangement, the more difficult people get. Haki were very smart, as I said to you, very smart in creating what they have is a council. And fundamentally, they got all the previous people that have been presidents of Haki. It's an immensely strong group. And fundamentally, it sits as a council. Whether it's 5 of those presidents or whatever it may be, make it less formal, do it twice a year, and give yourself an opportunity. They'll come to that event, and it gives you an opportunity to run whatever night. And let me suggest to you, the connections for, you're all students, but some of you are going to be in 3rd year, 4th year. You're going to be going out to the workplace very soon. The more connections we make as a community between kids at school, to NUGAS, to being in Haki, to being in the Kinota, all these opportunities, they're good for your growth. They're good for your leadership skills. They're good for all those things. So I say to you, do what they did, backwards and forwards. Do things for kids that are graduating, helping them work out what they need to do at university. It's another great opportunity to connect a lot of the people between and go the other way. Get your lead, get your presidents and bring them together.
I think I'll see you Monday, 7 o'clock. We're meeting upstairs.
I'm done. I'll be there.
With that, we'll take a few more final quick questions and tie this up.
Thanks, Jordan. My name's Louis. I'm second generation Greek Australian. I'm bilingual. And what I found was the 3rd generation, the parents saying to me that Greek's not important professionally, so I won't do that subject at school because they'll pick up another subject and they'll progress more in their career. The other thing I found, being bilingual and in the workforce, the work used to use me to interpret, but I don't see any real benefit in that for myself professionally. And the other thing is, we're seeing 3rd and 4th generation children, their parents are sending them to Greek school, and teachers are speaking them in English and saying, who can tell me what is an apple in Greek? How do we say apple? You know? Well, come on. Surely there must be a better way. And as a national union of Greek Australian students, and Greek being a little bit more central in, I guess, the life of Greeks and wanting to know and speak Greek at some point, surely there must be a better way to get some of these younger kids up to speed who are going to Greek school. I mean, and how can we address some of these other issues and thoughts, like in the workforce, or we have kids missing out on Greek because, you know, professionally it's not important.
That's a good question.
So Phil.
So that's a good question. I think it comes back to Alex's observation as well about streams, because on one view, if you raise a standard to the standard that you're expecting or that perhaps you went through, then you might lose a lot of people. And on the other hand, you need to make it accessible to a broad base, and you know that's the primary interest. And so long as people are attending, even if they don't pick up that much language, they'll pick up a great social network and some part of their identity that they'll identify with later on. And for me, that's paramount. And then success at HSC, VCE level is secondary to that.
So with that, I think we'll tie up the panel discussion for tonight. If we have one more question.
Now, as an outsider, I've learned more than 10 languages. So do you think it will be possible for you lots to be a bit more creative, like getting involved in karaoke, Greek, wise karaoke, I don't know, playing...
Thanks, Leo.
Out of curiosity, do you speak Greek? A little bit?
My friends are here, they taught me. Back in high school, teachers taught me. One of my friends, former friend, she's also Greek, she taught me. And other languages. I can curse in probably 5 of them.
The essentials. Alright. So with that, we'll tie things up.
Can I just say that I came out as a 5-year-old boy to Australia, and and I actually attended the Greek community of Melbourne afternoon Greek schools. And it was one of the best things I ever did. I used to say, like all the kids of my generation, bloody Greek school. But you know what? I had the opportunity of meeting lots and lots of other Greek Australian kids that I would not have met had I not gone to Greek school.
Well said.
So therein lies the message of tonight. Being Greek unites everyone. Go to Greek school.
Just one other little point if I can make out. I know in a lot of the Greek schools today, sure they do use the English language with Greek, teaching the kids how to speak Greek. But you know what? They're giving the young Greeks from grade 1 onwards of primary school an opportunity to learn and to improve their English, and at the same time get a great command of Greek, speaking Greek, reading Greek at primary school level. That has been done very successfully in many Greek schools around Melbourne.
All right. Was there one last... I think we can have time for exactly one last question.
It's not a question.
Or a statement, or speech.
It is, because there is someone in this room that I really want to acknowledge. Before I do that, I definitely agree with the sentiments about what being Greek means. There are so many different elements of what it means to be Greek, and that we should embrace them all. But I do not believe at all that we should let go of any of them. They are way too important from the traditions and customs that our grandparents brought here. They have, for me personally, developed who I am. I believe that every single person here, us as youth, need to fight for this every single day, because if we stop, it dies with us, and that's the end of that. Now, in terms of being Greek and its meaning in the future, in a multicultural society that we find ourselves in Australia, Greek Australian, as Peter has identified himself as the majority of us do. We need to build these bridges outside of the community, as Tassa said. And it is with this that I want to acknowledge this very special person in this room. Lasa over here, I'm sorry to point you out. She is not Greek at all. Not 1/4, not a half, not 1/8. And she is a president of a NUGAS affiliated club. So, it starts with us Greek youth to make it relevant, not only for ourselves but our friends. Because if we don't, in a multicultural society, it dies, and not only do we miss out, but everyone else in Australia and the world misses out. That's all I wanted to say.
Absolutely. As Kiri says, it's important to recognise the significance of breaking those intra-community barriers. So I thank all our panellists tonight for their contributions, their thoughts, and sharing their experiences. Naturally, we can acknowledge in that case that having a Greek Australian identity is much more vast and expansive than simply Souvlaki, Zorba, and going to the Antipodes Festival, especially after tonight. So thank you. We have a few small tokens.
acho. Diga-nos assim.